Welcome to the Miracle You, guiding you on the journey towards finding passion and purpose and how to discover, create, and live a life by your design. Whether your success has been plentiful or your missed opportunities have been overwhelming, we can help you become a more empowered, masterful person and show you how to share your gift with the world. It's time to inspire change from within with the host of the Miracle You, Vince Kramer.
Hello, imagination. I'm Vince Kramer, your host, and welcome to the Miracle You, where you learn about the magic of living your life by finding the example in real life.
Many times over the last 3 years in the podcast, we've talked about the understanding that we take on things as a child and we learn to live a certain way with a certain set of beliefs that we carry into adulthood until we learn or we're awakened to the fact that we no longer have to let those perceptions and beliefs of our childhood lead us from that point on in our life. We learn to be loved and to be safe and to feel like we're going to be fed if we act a certain way, just because of the reactions and inner reactions, if you will, from our parents, the people who are important in our lives, the people who are there who are meant to keep us safe. But as we get older, we learn that sometimes these behaviors that we learn, the beliefs that we've carried on, are actually inhibiting us from experiencing who we are at a greater level, understanding ourselves and how we're meant to show up. When we learn to start just being ourselves instead of being what's expected of us, we learn that we can be loved more unconditionally. We can be accepted by those around us for truly who we are and how we're meant to show up in the world. I'm with Reverend Betsy Jacks Scott today. Reverend Betsy is an author, coach, and minister. She practiced psychotherapy and family therapy in New York City for 2 decades, as well as being a grief group leader at St. Bartholomew's Church. Reverend Betsy is also the co-founder of Hudson Valley Weddings at the Hill. She's an ordained interfaith minister and clinical social worker. Her undergraduate degree is from Vassar College and a master's degree from the University of Chicago. Reverend Betsy is also a graduate of the One Spirit Seminary in New York City. She's the author of 2 books, Widowhood, Doorway to Calling and Conversion, and her newest book, Journey to Safe Harbor. I'd love for you to meet Reverend Betsy Jacks Scott. Betsy Jacks Scott, are you ready to share the miracle of you with the imagination?
It's a great pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here, Reverend Betsy. As I was doing research, I really found that you have a very important message that you're sharing with the world. Could you tell everybody a little bit more about you and your message?
I think my whole life has been learning about how to love. And I've discovered that we're not born learning how to love. It's something we have to learn throughout all our life. And so I think my message is just keep trying. We're all on a journey in this world and we all have mountains to climb. And my faith has always been, there is an answer, although I don't know what it is. So I've just kept seeking. And as I've sought, I found, because that's the great promise of the scriptures. He who knocks, the door will be opened unto you. He who seeks will find. And that's what I have found in my life. So I just want to say to everyone, keep going, keep seeking, and you'll find your answers, find your miracles, find your happiness and peace in your life.
Reverend Betsy, share with me, as you were growing up, did you always know that you had this calling to learn more about love and to help people love?
You know, as a young child, I became what we call a pleaser in order to try to get love. And a pleaser is someone who kind of gives up their own soul, really. They cease to know what they think or what they want or what they love, and they're studying everybody else to try to figure out what would please them in order to get the love they so desperately need. And that's actually an empty life. Everybody called me an angel. Everyone said what a good girl I was. But inside, I didn't feel that way because I wasn't in touch with me. I was just very good at being a good girl to get lots of praise, but that's not a good life. It really isn't. I don't think it's until I went to seminary that I learned that we're called not to be good, but to be loving. And loving is an active act of giving, whereas being good is actually trying to follow someone else's idea of what you should do in order to get their love. So one is trying to get love, and one is giving love. Of course, there are very many complications to those, but that served me well. I keep thinking about that as an active giving rather than, so you have to fill yourself up first in order to have love to give, versus being needy inside and always seeking someone else's love. It's a very different way to live in this world. And the second way is what brings happiness and peace. So as a child, I knew none of that. I was just very successful at being a pleaser, but really a very unhappy child. But no one knew I was unhappy because I was always smiling, always doing what I was told to do. So I think that I went to a wonderful college, which opened up my mind. I married a lovely man and had 2 children, and then he suddenly died in a car crash. And I think it was that car crash where everything I knew was basically gone. I mean, I had my beautiful children, but my whole way of life that I understood was just gone overnight. And I went to seminary seeking. And that's where I think they really began to open me up and say, Betsy, who are you really inside? I couldn't ignore my feelings anymore. I had such overwhelming grief that I had to feel my feelings. I had to go inside me and say, this is really who I am. I'm really a needy person. And I have to learn to fill myself up with love. And then, so I have something to give away. And this great journey of grief through the seminary ended up giving me a sense of finally, through a spiritual really healing, I felt that I was whole again. And then I was free to begin to actually care about somebody else.
At Imagine Miracles, we share that we're constantly having messages come to us. And those messages are always really helping us move in the direction that we're meant to move, and take us in a direction where we can share more of who we are in that experience. And the wake up calls that are part of these messages can be pretty devastating, and they get to a place where we have to look at life, and we decide we're going to look at life differently. Was there a calling for you to join the ministry before the loss of your husband?
I've always felt called to seek to be. I've always had a faith that there are answers, although I didn't always know them. What I've actually called all the way through seminary, I didn't know what I was being called to do. I was mostly trying to survive the grief and finally healing my grief. And then I remarried, and I had another journey, which I'd be glad to share with you. And then I actually went to a second seminary called the One Spirit Interfaith Seminary, where that's a seminary, this is going a little beyond my story, where you sort of be open to the spiritual practices of all great religions, feeling that they all are heading toward the one Holy Spirit. And then I felt greatly called to be ordained and to try to be a force for love in this world.
So as you started to realize that some of the programming of the past, the ways that we learn to get the love that we're looking for, or the safety that we're looking for, took you to a place where it was kind of an outside in type of thing. If I treat everyone really well, if I live the way they want me to live, if I show up the way they want me to show up, then, like you said, you're going to be accepted, you're going to be loved. How was it as you started to uncover that really you had more control, if you will, of the experiences that you had on the outside as you developed and learned to love more on the inside? How was that for you to then look back at that young girl and realize some of the things that really caused you pain And it was because of the perceptions and the beliefs that you had from that young childhood.
As a young child, I was really underneath. Nobody knew it because I was really good at hiding. I was so afraid and so nervous that no matter what I did would not be accepted. It was always like, oh my goodness, do I dare say this? Do I dare do that? People won't like it, and then they won't love me. And and I was full of anxiety. And so I've written this book, which I know we're going to talk about, Journey to Safe Harbor. And the reason I wrote it is the great miracle in my life is that once I found me, the safe harbor inside me, then all of this fear and anxiety has vanished. And I now feel to be me. And then I'm always grateful if people think, oh, Betsy, that's great. But I'm not living off of that. I'm living off this interior place, which I never knew about as a child. I wouldn't have known that existed. So to go from one to the other, I say, is a miracle. In my experience of what it's like to be on this earth and how it is to live and how it is to really learn to care for someone else. Can I share my definition of love I've discovered? When I was at Union Seminary, that was the first seminary I went to after the death of my first husband, they told me there was a wonderful professor there, Russell Davis, and he said his definition of love is a presence, an affirmation, and a union. So a presence means that you're actually with the other person. It's not like I was, oh my goodness, what can I do to get you to love me? It's more, I'm here with you because I'm coming from a place of strength within myself. And therefore I can stand on my own 2 feet and be with you. And an affirmation means that I actually listen to you and see who you are. I was always looking to see if they would like me, but this is about my actually listening to somebody else and saying, oh my goodness, they like, they like this and they don't like that. And they are unhappy about this, but happy about that. So you get to know them and affirm them. And then the third thing, union, I think what that means is that you go into yourself and you begin to have compassion and empathy and forgiveness on your own self and tune into your own feelings. And then when you're with somebody else, you can begin to share those feelings, or you can understand those feelings in somebody else. You're sort of united with them in their grief or in their happiness or wherever they are. And I find this is a lifelong journey. I keep practicing this. I'm a grandmother, I'm happy to say. And I just find more and more that I'm using this, for example, with my own children, that I listen to them and say, oh, this is who they are. I'm not trying to control them. I'm not trying to tell them what to do. I have confidence in the own inner growth of each person and to see how they're growing. And at the same time, being true to myself. It's a really very happy way to live. It's this versus this other way that was not very happy.
I think you shared earlier in different words, but it's truly the way we're meant to live, to love ourselves and to be there for others and to be able to love them for who they are and their experience. What would you say to someone that just doesn't or can't find the inner guidance and the will to be able to love themselves? What would you say to them?
To say to them that this is their task, this is their journey, this is what they need to seek. And I believe if you seek, you find. If you just don't give up, if you keep searching. Now, there are many ways and paths to this inner self. I mean, for some people, find meditation very helpful, where they actually are quiet and listen to their inner selves and begin to tune into what feelings are really there and what thoughts are there and begin to have confidence through that process. Some people find talk therapy, very helpful, where they go talk to someone and start talking about their lives. And then through that process, they begin to get to know themselves better. I also think studying history is very important. I spent a lot of my life, I haven't told you about that, looking into my background. And I think then you begin to say, oh, well, I'm really In my case, I'm the granddaughter of Canadian Baptist missionaries to India for 30 years. So I began to thinking, well, what heritage did I get from them? What was their thought path? What did I inherit down through the generations? Who am I based on my history? So I think your history, your spirituality, your thought process through therapy, nature has always been a great way to begin to find peace in the soul and find the inner self. I mean, long walks and looking at nature, looking at the miracle of growth every spring. How can it be that these old twigs suddenly bloom these beautiful flowers? You have to be in awe. And in that awe, what is a true feeling in you? So I think we all have this mountain to climb. There are different ways to climb, but I think the important thing is to try. So if you don't know which way to go, and that's understandable, because how do you know unless you know, is to try something. Go for a long walk and see if that doesn't begin to give you a little sense of peace and or try meditation, or try therapy, or try beginning to look into your history, or asking your family more about yourself, and just say, I know there's a path, I'm going to find it, because that's the promise. He who seeks will find.
So as you walked your journey and attended the seminaries, brought yourself into, understanding that there's so much available to us to help us on the journey, especially as you shared so well, as we seek ourselves, we seek the miracle of who we are. So readily available in the title of our podcast today. On that seeking journey, it led you to yourself, and it led you to learn more about yourself. And then the journey to Safe Harbor was born. Tell me about the book and how, one, it illustrates your journey, but also why you wrote it for us.
Journey to Safe Harbor, that's my metaphor, the safe harbor, that place in yourself where we feel safe and secure and loved. And I was so absolutely thrilled and I could be in a different place in this world, that I could get rid of this fear and anxiety and always being on edge. Will anybody like me? I actually didn't like myself. To this other place in this life where I feel secure and loved and happy and peaceful, and more able to be there with somebody else and to listen to them and to love them for who they are. That is, to me, was such a miracle, that journey, that I just felt compelled to write it. My psyche wouldn't leave me alone. Almost daily it said, Betsy, you got to finish that book. You can't die till you finish it. You just got to finish it. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, to write this long book. And I worked on it for many, many years, but I just felt compelled to do it. And this book is basically sort of a V. The first half that sort of goes down into, I didn't talk about this, but in my background, these missionaries, they had 5 children and they ended up losing 3 sons. And one of them committed suicide at age like 27. And I've seen pictures of this man. I've never met him because he died many years before I was born. But he looks like the sweetest, nicest human being. How could he do this? And by struggling, I came to realize that his parents put their mission before the well-being of their own children. And I decided, and I was thinking about what love is, and they felt compelled to do what they did, to try to go to India, but they didn't somehow feel the equal need to give this presence, this affirmation, this union to their own children. And it bothered me enormously that this could be so. And I think this has come down through my own family. I think I grew up in a family like that, like my missionaries, and I had a very depressed brother. So that's the first half of the book, is sort of going between India and Chicago, where I grew up, and Maine, where I went in the summers, and trying to follow this journey where we didn't talk to each other as children. We didn't have a happy, family life. We were all sort of isolated. We were isolated from our own communities. And then the second half of the book is my journey, my mountains that I took to come to this new place, which has actually ended up uniting not only myself, but my family. We all now are really a warm, happy family together, and my communities. So that I just thought this was a journey worth going. And one of the mountains I didn't talk about, which is after I married a second time, which was about almost 8 years after my first husband died, I married this very nice man who I fell in love with. And then I found, and he had 2 children. He was a widow and I was a widower. We each had 2 children. And I found that step families presented a whole nother mountain for me, because all of a sudden I didn't feel I was center stage. I felt, my lovely new husband, really his children and his family were center stage to him. And that was hard for me to take. So I went and got psychoanalyzed. So that was one of my mountains. And through that journey, I finally had to feel all the feelings from my childhood that I never wanted to feel. How left out I felt, how unloved I felt. All of that, I finally had to. It's otherwise you have to go through the darkness to get to the light. You can't just jump into that light. You've got to go. And I had to go back and go through all that. I just kept doing it because I knew I had to, and because I didn't say this, but I didn't have very good relationships with my children either. And I didn't understand why, because I was, again, the good mother, but what I wasn't was the loving mother. And I didn't know that. So by going back and finally feeling my feelings, which is a hard, painful journey, but we can do it. We all can do it. I was told in seminary that we're finite creatures, and so our emotions are finite. And if we feel them, they begin to dissipate and go away. They don't control you anymore. So as I felt them, then all of this self-loathing and all of this shame and all of this that had plagued me, and I didn't understand it, but when you are filled with those things, then other people find you difficult. If you finally feel all those things and are free, then I'll never forget, after I finished this, I went to visit my daughter in her home, and she said, "Mother, you are now a stance of unconditional love in our house, and I want you around." And I nearly fell off the chair. And my daughter-in-law said to me, "Our door is always open to you. We want you there." And I thought, well, this was worth all the effort to get to this place in life where my own children and daughter-in-law want me around. And then also through this long journey, I found that I wasn't alone. I think that's one of the miracles that one finds, that in the darkest places, that's where you find joy. Like back in seminary, when I was in the middle of grief, I was coming out of the chapel one day at Union, where they'd just been talking about Easter and Christ on the cross, and his saying, my God, why have you abandoned me?" And I walked out of the chapel, and this wonderful preacher, Dr. James Forbes, tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "Betsy, you know what they're talking about in there, but you can't take any pride in it because it's been too hard on you." And somehow his naming that I felt abandoned, which indeed I did as a young widow, so pierced my heart that I just ran, because I didn't know what had happened to me, and laid down in a little chapel at Union. And suddenly I felt a presence with me. I thought, this presence knows me. I'm not alone in the world. I know this presence. It changed my life. Forever after, everyone said, "What's happened to you? You're so radiant." I just wasn't alone anymore. So this experience, which many people in this world have had, this mystical experience of the Holy Spirit coming to you, which is, you can't explain, you can't duplicate it, it doesn't make any rational sense, but it changes your life. It's a long tradition. All cultures have had this, but it came to me when I was at the bottom of the pit. When I felt my feelings, all of a sudden, this presence said, "You're not alone in this world. I'm here with you." And it's a miracle. It is the miracle that we can't explain. That's why I've written my book, so everybody understand my journey and that they can have the same journey. We're all called upon to have this journey.
That's so great that you shared it in the way that you did, and like you said, that we all have our journeys, and I'm sure the book will help ignite journeys for some people as they realize that just in hearing your story and what you experienced, that they're not alone, plus that they can do it. Pretty much what this podcast is all about, that the bottom sometimes, or what we feel the bottom, is really the door to experiencing our lives in so many great ways. Believe it or not, we're close to the end of our time together. Is there a piece of guidance that you want to make sure that everyone takes away from our podcast today?
Please believe there's a path for you. Just don't give up, but keep going and keep seeking, and just hold on to that promise of he who seeks will find. He who knocks on the door will be opened unto you. Just hold on to that and keep going, and you will find your way. Because I, this frightened little girl, found my way. And if I can, so can you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Betsy, for being the example for us to really understand that there's so much more to us, and that as we learn to love ourselves, we're able to bring that to the world in a way that will change and transform ourselves and the people around us, as well as the world that we live in, because God knows that we could use a little bit more love in the world right now. So thank you so much for sharing your story and being with us today.
It's been my great honor to be with you. Thank you.
On behalf of my wife, Mary, who's my business partner, also the entire team here at Imagine Miracles, we want to wish each and every one of you a miracle day.
You've completed this episode of The Miracle You, but we have plenty more to help you discover your own personal passion and purpose. Head over to themiracleyou.com for free resources to assist you on your journey, as well as register for our free webinar, Discover Your Miracle Life, 3 Mind Awakening Steps Toward Your Unique Purpose, or apply for a one-on-one Your Life, Your Way breakthrough session and discover your next best step on your journey. All available exclusively on our website. That's themiracleyou.com. We look forward to sharing more experiences of passion, purpose, and life by design next time, right here on The Miracle You.